So for a while now, Sony has been killing it when it comes to ANC headphones. If you're looking for a pair of premium ANC headphones, then the Sony 1000XM4s are a good option. And if you're looking for a pair of mid-tier ANC headphones, then the Sony XB900N are a good option as well. But now that we have the new Sony 1000XM4s, the differences between these two headphones are a little more significant than when we used to compare the XB900N to the previous 1000XM3s. So today we're going to compare these two headphones and we're going to see which one's right for you. Now, first off, there's price. The new Sony 1000XM4s have a retail price of $350, putting them squarely in the premium ANC headphone bracket, whereas the XB900Ns have a retail price of $250. But since they are a little over a year old now, they do like to constantly go on sale for $178, making them a great buy at that price. Nonetheless, if you want to pick either of these headphones up, they will be linked down below. And if you want to learn more about either of these headphones, please watch their full reviews, because we're only going to be going over their main differences. But now let's address the carrying cases here. Unfortunately, the XB900Ns come included with a carrying pouch. So if you do plan on commuting a lot with your headphones, then I highly advise that you invest in a hard shell carrying case. Whereas the 1000XM4s come included with a really good hard shell carrying case that's going to keep your headphones perfectly safe if you cram them into an already overstuffed backpack or carry-on. But now let's talk about the headphones themselves. In general, both of these headphones have the same build quality. They're both mainly made out of plastic, they both feel sturdy in your hands, and they both have zero cracking or squeaking whenever you flex them. But these headphones do feel very different. The XB900N's body is mostly made of this textured plastic, whereas the 1000XM4s have more of a slate finish to them, and then their soft touch on the caps of their ear cups. Overall, yes, the 1000XM4s feel more premium in your hands than the XB900N. But personally, I do prefer the feel of the leatherette on the XB900Ns over the leatherette found on the 1000XM4s. The leatherette on the XB900Ns feels a little more supple, whereas the leatherette on the 1000XM4s feels very plasticky. Overall, both of these headphones have decent build quality, but personally, I did expect a little more from the 1000XM4s. Whereas the XB900N's build quality is perfectly acceptable for mid-tier ANC headphones. Now, when it comes to fit, both of these headphones should fit most people just fine. Now, both of these headphones are big head approved because neither of them have a lot of clamping force. And when it comes to weight, both of these headphones weigh in at 254 grams, making them very lightweight because most ANC headphones in these categories weigh in between 270 to 290 grams. So both of these headphones are easy to forget that you have on, and they aren't super noticeable when you're walking around with them on. But when it comes to their ear pads, they are a little different. Now, the earpads on both of these headphones are just as spacious as one another, and they fit me just fine. But if you have larger ears or ears that stick out a lot, then you might want to go with something like either the Bose NC700, the Sennheiser PXC552s, or even the Surface headphones too. But one crucial detail to point out here is that the earpads on the XB900Ns do have a little more surface area coming in contact with your skin than the 1000XM4s do. So the earpads on the XB900Ns do heat up a little faster. Now, neither of these headphones have an overheating problem, but the XB900Ns do heat up a little faster than the 1000XM4s, especially when you're walking around with them on. But one last thing that I do want to point out here is going to have to do with looks. In general, these headphones look very similar to one another, but I do prefer the looks of the 1000XM4s, specifically because their headband is more low profile than the headband on the XB900Ns. Now, the headband on the XB900Ns isn't super bulbous like either of Bose's headphones, but the more low profile, the better. But with all that being said, when it comes to fit, I do gotta say the 1000XM4s do manage to edge out a win here, specifically because of their earpads that have a little less surface area coming in contact with your skin. But other than that, these headphones should fit most people just fine. But now let's talk about tech specs. Both of these headphones charge via a USB-C port as they should. And when it comes to battery life, both of these headphones are really good. The Sony 1000XM4s have an advertised battery life of 30 hours with their ANC turned on, and the XB900Ns have an advertised battery life of 35 hours with their ANC turned on. But also keep in mind, you can always stretch out the battery life on both of these headphones if you use them with their ANC turned off. But when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, this is where things start to get very different. The 1000XM4s can be connected to two devices at the same time, so you can easily hot swap from your phone to your computer, whereas the XB900Ns can only be connected to one device at a time. Now, ultimately, it's not a huge deal if your headphones can hot swap from one device to another, but it is very nice to be able to, and this is a very standard feature that, quite honestly, it did take Sony a while to catch up. However, if you do want to be able to hot swap with the 1000XM4s, then you are going to lose LDAC support if you're an Android user, and you're going to have to use AAC instead. Now, if you're an iPhone user, LDAC support doesn't matter because iPhones top out at AAC anyways. And in general, both of these headphones are going to use AAC no matter what if you're an iPhone user. Now, while we're on the topic of audio codecs, the Sony 1000XM4s have SBC, AAC, and LDAC, which is Sony's own high-res audio codec. Whereas the XB900Ns have support for SBC, AAC, and LDAC, just like the 1000XM4s. But they also have support for aptX and aptX HD. Now, in general, Sony is phasing out aptX support on their newer ANC headphones in favor of LDAC. But more importantly, when it comes to watching movies or videos on your phone, both of these headphones have zero latency across the board, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android device. And if you want to, you can still use a wired connection with either of these headphones because both of these headphones still have easy to reach 3.5mm audio jacks. Now, I know this sounds basic, but I do like to point it out because some manufacturers are starting to remove the audio jacks on some of their headphones. But now let's talk about listening to music with these headphones. Now, both of these headphones sound the same when it comes to clarity, soundstage, and instrument separation. And since both of these headphones connect to Sony's app, you can make either of these headphones sound however you want. If you like a neutral or vocals focus EQ, you can do that. Or if you like a bass heavy EQ, you can also do that. But where these headphones really differ is when it comes to their bass. The bass on the 1000XM4s should be able to please most people who want to physically feel their music, because the bass on these headphones has a good kick to it. But the bass on the XB900N is on a whole other level. Having the clear bass slider on the 1000XM4 set to 10 is like having the clear bass slider on the XB900Ns set to 4. If you want, you can make it so the XB900Ns rattle your head way more than your average pair of headphones. That's what the XB in their name stands for, extra bass. And having all of this extra bass can be a lot of fun from time to time. And personally, I do like using the extra bass feature on the XB900Ns when I'm watching movies with them, because it does add an extra level of immersiveness to whatever you're watching. It's like having a subwoofer strapped to your head. But the extra bass feature on the XB900Ns can get old after a while. So if you don't want to use it, you don't have to, but it's there if you want it. But there is one major thing to point out here that's really going to affect my Android users. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you're an iPhone user, both of these headphones are going to use AAC no matter what, which is great. But if you're an Android user, I do gotta point out that the XB900Ns do go from using LDAC to using SBC if you change their EQ. And unfortunately, the XB900Ns just don't sound as rich as they do when they're using LDAC versus when they're using SBC. Whereas the 1000XM4s will continue to use LDAC or AAC, no matter what EQ you're using, depending on whether you have their simultaneous connectivity turned on or off. So overall, if you're an iPhone user, both of these headphones sound good and they should be able to please most people. But personally, I do prefer the XB900Ns because of their extra bass feature. But for my Android users, just keep in mind that using your own EQ on these headphones does mean you'll be stuck with SBC, which just doesn't sound as good as either AAC or LDAC. Now, when it comes to controlling your music, both of these headphones have touchpads. You swipe up or down to adjust your volume, and you swipe front or back to skip through your music. Now, for the most part, both of these headphones have a high level of accuracy. But on occasion, you will get missed inputs, but these touchpads aren't problematic. However, I do want to point out that I do find it easier to use the touchpad on the XB900N, because this touchpad doesn't have soft touch like the 1000XM4s, so my finger glides a little easier. But something the 1000XM4s do have that the XB900Ns don't are wear sensors. So when you take these headphones off, they'll automatically pause the music, and then when you put them back on, they'll start playing your music again. Now personally, I don't care for wear sensors, so I just usually turn them off on all of my headphones, but they're there. But now let's talk about the active noise cancellation on these headphones. Now in general, the ANC on both of these headphones doesn't have a lot of cabin pressure, which is good for comfort. The ANC on these headphones also doesn't change how your music sounds, but just as you'd expect, the Sony 1000XM4s block out way more noise than the XB900Ns. But so that you can see for yourself, we're going to jump into an ANC test. So, like you may have just seen, the Sony 1000XM4s block out way more noise than the XB900Ns across the board. And I also included the entry-level Sony XB900N here because they also block out a little more noise than the XB900N. Now, just keep in mind, the 710Ns are newer than the XB900Ns because they were released in the spring of 2020. Whereas the XB900N were released in the summer of 2019. So what I'm getting at here is that the active noise cancellation on the XB900N isn't their strong suit. It's useful for like when you're at home, but if you are looking to block out the most amount of noise here, you are better off going with the 1000XM4s. However, like I mentioned in my full review, in this controlled test where all of these headphones are blocking out the same audio samples, I did find that the 1000XM3s running their 4.5.2 firmware were blocking out a touch more noise than the 1000XM4s running their 2.0.6 firmware, which is the latest firmware at the time of this recording. So, even though the ANC on the 1000XM4s is great, I do feel Sony could do better, and we are going to have to revisit their ANC after they get a firmware update. But now let's talk about the ambient modes on these headphones. Now, the ambient mode on both of these headphones sounds very natural, and they both have zero hissing in the background, which is super important for when you're watching movies with these headphones. But overall, the ambient mode on the 1000XM4s is better than the ambient mode on the XB900Ns for two key reasons. First off, the 1000XM4s do a much better job of blocking out wind noise when walking outdoors. And also, the 1000XM4s have an active ambient mode, meaning that they'll actively block out sudden spikes and loud noises, saving you from jump scares. But let me just show you what I'm talking about. Slight headphone warning. So, like you may have just seen, when the 1000XM4s detected that loud noise, they turned their ambient mode off, and when that loud noise stopped, they turned their ambient mode back on. Now, personally, I love when headphones have an active ambient mode because it does save you from jump scares, whereas the XB900Ns just let in everything. And this can also really come in handy when you're working at home with your headphones on and your dog starts barking when the UPS man comes around. Now, another new feature on the Sony 1000XM4s that isn't found on the XB900N is Speak to Chat, which I like to think of as an extension of their ambient mode, which works a little like this. Hello there! So this is Speak to Chat. Basically, whenever I start talking, the headphones will automatically lower the volume of your music and pump in all of the ambient sound around you, so that you can talk to someone without even to have to touch your headphones. And then, once you're done talking, you can either wait for the headphones themselves to start playing music again, or you can double tap on the touchpad. We all know that it's a lie. Now I'm all alone. But ultimately for me, Speak to Chat is just one of those gimmicks that I'm just not going to use. Now, Speak to Chat on these headphones doesn't get activated if other people are talking around you. It does a great job of rejecting that. But if you do decide to use Speak to Chat on these headphones, then you have to be completely silent. Speak to Chat on these headphones will get activated if you're singing along to your music, if you're thinking out loud, even very quietly. And it's also going to get activated if you start laughing. Now, even though, yeah, you can quickly toggle Speak to Chat on or off on these headphones, either by pressing 2 fingers on their touchpad or through their app, I still find it to be more of a nuisance rather than helpful. Every time my headphones stop my music, every time I just utter a few words. Just because I say thank you when I'm getting off the bus, or if I say thank you when I'm checking out at the deli or La Bodega, it doesn't mean that I need my headphones to stop my music or podcast every single time. So I just permanently keep Speak to Chat turned off on these headphones. And if I am going to have a quick conversation with someone, personally, I do prefer to use Quick Attention because I have full control over it. Because on either of these headphones, if you fully cover the touchpad, they're going to lower the volume of your music and let in all of the ambient sound around you, like this. And then when you let go, the headphones will go back to normal again. Now, even though I do prefer Quick Attention over Speak to Chat, it could be better. The problem with Quick Attention on both of these headphones is that you gotta constantly keep their touchpad covered. So if you're gonna try to have a conversation with someone like this both looks and feels very awkward. Sony has to change it so that when you have their touchpad covered for a full second, your headphones are going to get locked into Quick Attention mode. You can let go and have your conversation with your hands free like a normal human. And then when you're done, you can just double tap on the touchpad and have the headphones go back to normal again. And I'm making a big deal about this because there are plenty of other headphones out there that have a similar feature, and Sony can easily make Quick Attention better by applying a simple change that they can push out to all of their headphones through a software update. But finally, here's the microphone test, and this isn't Sony's strong suit. Now, I do feel that the microphone on the Sony XB900N is decent enough for like a quick conversation in a quiet room, but my voice does sound a little muffled, and this microphone doesn't do the best job of blocking out ambient noise. Now, even though my voice does sound better with the Sony 1000XM4s, it still doesn't sound super clear. However, something that this microphone is doing a good job of is blocking out ambient noise. Because right now, I've got this AC unit turned on. And if we were to switch over to my lapel microphone, you're going to clearly hear that AC unit. But if we were to switch back over to the Sony 1000XM4s, it's gone. But with all that being said, there are some important differences to take into account here if you're trying to decide between these two headphones. Now obviously, the 1000XM4s are the better option here for constant commuters because of their superior active noise cancellation, active ambient mode, slightly better sounding microphone for phone calls, and included hard shell carrying case. But the 1000XM4s also have simultaneous connectivity, which is super important for power users, and they also have wear sensors and speak to chat. And when it comes to sound, they should be able to please most people. But if you're somebody that really likes bass, then you'll definitely want to go with the XB900N. The extra bass feature on the XB900N is a lot of fun to listen to from time to time, and it also adds an extra level of immersiveness when watching movies with these headphones. And besides, if you don't plan on constantly commuting with your headphones, then these should be perfectly fine. Especially if you can pick them up for $178. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.